Hey guys, and welcome back for today's video where I want to touch on a brand new national poll that was released today from Fox News. They asked a ton of different questions. If you'd like to take a look at all the data for yourself, I'll link this down at the bottom of the video description. I'm specifically going to focus on policy as well as the 2020 Democratic primary race and the head-to-head matchups between these upper-tier Democratic hopefuls and their matchups against Donald Trump. Now, the sample size here, specifically for these policy questions and those head-to-head races, they used obviously Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and that was a sample size of 1,000 registered voters. And then just the Democratic primary specific questions, that sample size gets reduced down to around 450 or so registered voters. But starting with the full sample size across the entire political spectrum, that was asked for these policy-related questions. And I'm going to start off here with a little bit of a rant. So on Twitter today, we're seeing a lot of corporate establishment-friendly Democrats railing against the popularity of Medicare for All, specifically citing this poll, and it's an extremely disingenuous attack because this is the question that was asked. Getting rid of private health insurance, Medicare for All doesn't do that, it still allows for supplemental insurance, and moving to a government-run healthcare system for everyone. What's missing from this question? No mention of Medicare for All, no mention of Medicare. When you're trying to elicit a negative response, you implement the phrase government run, and they know that Medicare is an extremely popular program. It's one of the most popular programs that the government has. So whenever you reference Medicare in a question or Medicare for all, it elicits more of a positive response. So this question doesn't mention Medicare for all, and also it's not even what Medicare for all would be because that doesn't get rid of private health insurance. So it's an extremely slanted question to the negative, and even with that, it was still able to get 41% who were in favor of it compared to 53% who were opposed to it. Now, if I could reframe this question, I think I could actually get it to be the most popular thing on this list in terms of the favorable support of it, and it would be a question something along the lines of, are you in favor of implementing a Medicare for All system that would reduce the age of Medicare over a 4-year period from 65 to 55 to 45 to 35 to 0, while eliminating copays, deductibles, and private insurance premiums, while also allowing you to pick your doctor and hospitals? If you framed it in that way, then I think it would probably be the strongest favorable out of all of these different things that were asked in this list. But that's not the question they asked. They decided to go with eliminating private insurance and having it be called government-run healthcare. Whenever you implement that phrase government run, you're trying to get a negative response, and they did that to some extent in this one with this particular question. Now I'm going to go through, after that little bit of a rant that I did on that first policy question, and go to the top of the list here. So creating an annual 2% wealth tax on an individual's worth over $50 million in addition to income tax. So they even threw in the in addition to income tax to make it sound like it was really punitive. But even that, the wealth tax, 68% in favor of it, only 26% were opposed to it. And if you're watching the Democratic debates, you'd think that this would be a really controversial thing for people to support, because really you only get Warren and Sanders that are really pushing for something like a wealth tax, where all the other Democrats on the debate stage are, no, we can't do that, too controversial, we'll go about it in other ways. But when you go and actually ask the voters across the political spectrum, increasing taxes on very wealthy individuals is very popular, and if the Democratic coalition and their candidates and representatives specifically could unite around that, it could be a really strong thing for them to run on. But since there's strife and different opinions and, you know, just keeping it real, the candidates that are bankrolled by the higher dollar interests are going to be the ones that are against a wealth tax, while those like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who get the majority of their donations from the small dollar individual donations, not taking that super PAC money, you're in a situation where you have those opposing forces going against each other, and voters are going to say, well, if you as a party can't even get your act together and go for a similar type of thing, then how are you going to get the entire American people behind you, uniting, the Democrats and independents, and even bringing in some Republicans who would be for increasing the taxes on the higher income earners? But anyways, kind of another rant on that particular policy question. But moving down here, so the next question, changing the healthcare system so that every American can buy into Medicare if they want to. And again, you have the popular phrase of Medicare in this question, and then also having another positive word of having the choice or the option or wanting to buy into something. That's also likely going to elicit a positive response. We see that's at 66% who are in favor of it, 26% who are opposed to it. And then legalizing the recreational use of marijuana on a national level, 63% for it, 34% are opposed to it. Making minor changes to Obamacare, 53% are in favor of that compared to 38% who are opposed to it. So definitely the Overton window has moved on healthcare, and it started with the 2016 campaign of Bernie Sanders, where now having at least the option of buying into Medicare, which would have never been even discussed before we went into that 2016 primary cycle for the Democrats, it's just now becoming more of the centrist policy because the Overton window has been moved so much in that instance, where they're like, okay, we know Medicare is popular, so if we want to get elected, we have to at least use the phrasing of Medicare and what we want to pass. So Medicare, for those who want to buy it, we'll use that as our Medicare for all. And the Obamacare situation, it was really supposed to be the compromise between Democrats and Republicans. This is what Romney Care is. But what it ended up being is essentially just a massive handout to the private insurance industries and the pharmaceutical industries. And it's continued to increase cost. It has had some positive impacts like expanding Medicaid coverage. But nonetheless, it seems like the American people are starting to move towards a system where buy into government insurance so you don't have the overhead that is involved with dealing with a private insurance industry. But again, that was at 53% who are in favor of it, 38% who are opposed to it, and then building a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. This was one of the big things that the Republicans ran on during the 2018 midterms. I believe initially they wanted to run more so on their tax plan, but they were testing that in certain areas. It wasn't polling very well, and specifically in that special election race that was held in Pennsylvania that the Democrats were able to turn early on after the tax bill was passed. It was a loser for Republicans, so they went away from that one and more so went in campaigning on the border wall. But with that being your key stance as a Republican running, or one of the key things you're running on, and it's 8% underwater with the American people, 44% to 52%, it's going to be a tough uphill battle to climb in that instance. So now I want to move down and take a look at the 2020 Democratic primary field, and we're seeing a little bit of change in the numbers. So Biden still around the numbers that we've been seeing from him, in first place in this one at 30%. Sanders second place after we've seen quite a bit of a reduction here from Warren from the prior Fox News poll that was taken in the later portion of the month of October. So we see Sanders in second at 20% and Warren at 13%. In the prior poll, she was at 21%, so going down 8 percentage points, while Sanders was able to pick up a point. In Biden, reduced 1 percentage point, and Buttigieg stayed the same at 7%, and then Bloomberg there is initially at 5%. Klobuchar was able to gain a couple points there, up to 5%. Gabbard and Yang each at 3%, Booker at 2 percentage points, and you can see these national Fox News polls over time. Joe Biden has been really resilient, kind of in that upper 20s, lower 30 percentage point range, but actually for Bernie Sanders, this is the first poll that we've seen from him where he's been able to eclipse that 20 percentage point number since all the way back before Joe Biden entered the race, where he was there at 23 percentage points in March. So we're seeing a little bit more strength, certainly, from Bernie Sanders and his campaign over the past few weeks and past couple of months, where he was showing a bit more weakness through the months of August, September, and somewhat of October. All right, so now I want to go down and take a look at those hypothetical matchups between the upper-tier Democratic hopefuls and Donald Trump. So we see Biden with a 7 percentage point lead, 48% to Trump, who's at 41%. Warren not quite as strong, only a 1 percentage point lead, 46% to Trump, who's at 45%. And then actually Sanders has the strongest support out of any of the Democratic hopefuls. Biden was at 48%, but Sanders is at 49%. But also in this instance, Trump was doing a little bit better, where he's at 43%, so a 6-point lead for Bernie Sanders in this instance. And then we see Pete Buttigieg with a 1 percentage point lead over Donald Trump, 43 to 42. And then really the definition of a centrist Democrat, corporate-friendly Democrat, Michael Bloomberg, having a 5-point lead over Donald Trump, 45% to 40 percentage points. And we see a lot of more centrist-type Democrats who are advocating that you're going to be stronger if you run as a centrist, because then you can bring in those voters who are, you know, independent or center right-leaning Republican voters, that maybe you can appeal to some of them. Well, we've seen that strategy over the past 20 years, and it has failed time and again. So let's just take a look at the past 20 years. Al Gore ran as a centrist, lost. John Kerry ran as a centrist, lost. Hillary Clinton ran as a centrist, and she lost. Who's the only Democrat running for president that was able to win over the last 20 years? It was Barack Obama. He did extremely well electorally. And what did he run on? Hope and change, and changing the system in Washington. Much more running as a progressive than those other individuals that I was discussing. Now, obviously, when Obama actually got into office, he didn't push for those progressive priorities as much as what he had campaigned on. But nonetheless, it just shows you that when you campaign as somebody who wants to change the system and have a progressive mindset towards things and changing the status quo, that is a winning strategy. And we've seen it over the past 20 years where the centrist, moderate, milquetoast candidates have not had much in the way of success. And those would be your Michael Bloomberg, your Pete Buttigieg, your Joe Biden. But I think that specifically for the Democrats, even though it's not showing as much with Warren's numbers head-to-head against Trump, I think if they want their best chance at going on and winning this thing, I think that they should go with a progressive, somebody like a Sanders or a Warren, and try to replicate some of that success like we saw from Obama in 2008 and 2012 specifically, whereas the centrist candidates haven't had the ability to find much in the way of success over the past 20 years. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about in this video. Actually, this is quite a bit longer than I initially planned for. I appreciate any of you guys who made it to this point in the video and listened to me rant about all these different things and numbers from this poll. And again, if you want to look at all the data for yourself, I'll have a link to this poll down at the bottom of the video description. So I appreciate you stopping by. Consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, and I hope to see you guys back here for my next video.